have Joseph Frangos with me. I've known Joseph for a couple years. Him and his wife have been in business together, but you guys have two things that really stick out to me a lot that I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
if you could speak a little bit more about, which
Mhm.
was you have the Legacy Makers Mastermind, which obviously we can see with your background.
Yeah.
And you also have another thing that I really enjoy watching, which is
Mhm.
Where My Dad's At, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I wanted you to speak a little bit about those two things and basically the intentionality behind those two things, because they really mark, I think, what you are doing in this space. And so I wanted you to talk about that.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you again so much for inviting me onto your podcast. I'm super honored and humbled to be here with you. So
The
yeah,
honor is all mine.
no, it's an absolute pleasure. But yeah, so I guess we'll start with the Legacy Makers. I started the Legacy Makers just with funny enough, the thought of how can I, as a single individual person, impact as many people as possible, especially nowadays with so much chaos and misguidance, or just a lack of leadership is what I really noticed. And how can I help create leaders and build leaders, not only in like business, but also in their own lives? And so Legacy Makers is really how that kind of started. And when you look at the word legacy, it's depicted as something that's handed down. Now, a lot of people think of like, oh, my family's legacy is money, or my family's legacy was this business, or whatever it might be. But it's so much deeper than that. It's what were your actions? What were your behaviors? What did you do for your family that left some sort of mark on them? Even like, for example, you being in my life, you've impacted my own legacy when it comes to business, and even just as a personality, your energy shines. And so I want to
Thank
receive
you.
that, right? And I want to reciprocate that into the world. And so that's really how that looks, and that's how that works. And so when I started thinking about what can I create when it comes to legacy, and how can I impact other people's legacies to then carry on through generations, that's how that stemmed. And so we created the Legacy Makers Mastermind, which is just, it's built for entrepreneurs. It's built for the individual who works a job but wants to think bigger and go further and take this simple concept of just like, I want to be a great person.
Right.
Sometimes people just don't know how, really, right? So I want to help bring that light, bring people that are in my network like yourself to that community, and just pour into them and help them really see what's possible through life, right? And so to kind of roll, right? When we think of legacy and we think of what we do as an impact, well, then there's my daughter, right? My beautiful baby girl, Madeline. And so then we created Where My Dad's At, because I love making content. And so her and I create Where My Dad's At videos. So I go, yo, she says, Where My Dad's At, right? And so Legacy Makers and my legacy is just as important as anybody else's, right? We put so much focus into what can we do to help others and build others. When you look at your kid and you think about, this is my bloodline, this is my child, this is who's going to carry out anything and everything that I do as a person, as a business owner, as a man, especially her take lightly, right? So we created Where My Dad's At, so we could pour into dads, we can talk to more fathers and kind of showcase healthy parenting, involved parenting, being that engaged dad and that an involved father, where we have that bond as a duo. And our goal really with social media and Where My Dad's At is just to inspire, to educate, and entertain families all around the globe. So yeah, it's exciting.
I love that because, aside from entrepreneurship and leadership, which I think has
Mhm.
a lot to do with like your brand, right? With Legacy Makers and even being a father.
Mhm.
We don't see a lot of fathers, in this day and age and in this generation, especially our generation.
Yeah.
I believe we're both millennials,
Yeah.
so it's hard even in the millennials, much less the generation after us, to really see fatherhood and to
Yeah.
see an involved father. And
Mm.
so where did you learn, I guess, what you do? Is it just from a heart of wanting to be a good dad to your daughter? Because I think that that's something that isn't really talked about a lot,
Mhm.
from men your age, and there are a lot of men that are your age or younger or older, and they just don't know how to be a father, but would love to be a good one. They just never had an
Right.
example. So how did you do that, or how are you doing that, I guess, currently?
Yeah. So I'm 28 years old, right? And I had a guy tell me yesterday, he goes, "Man, I thought you were 40." And I
Yeah.
was like, well, that's both a compliment, kind of
Wisdom,
offensive.
wisdom, because of the
Yeah, yeah.
wisdom.
I was like, there's another way to form that. But
Yeah.
to answer your question, I look at it from the perspective of awareness, right? Because back to legacy, right? And I've said this before, and my dad has heard me say it to him. I'm like, you've taught me a lot of things that I don't want to be. And I was like, I say that in the most loving way possible. My dad and I are, if anything, now we're more than we're friends, more than it's a father-son thing. He's my friend, and we can just conversate with each other. And he taught me a lot about what I don't want to carry on, and he taught me a lot about what I don't want to be. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to struggle financially. Um, I don't want to spank my kid because that's not how I'm going to drive this. You have to respect me thing. There's no, I'm not going to say there's no need for that type of discipline, but I mean, really, there's not. I have this great relationship with my daughter, and I'm able to discipline her through um, just means of really like verbal, like, all right, we're gonna sit down for a minute. You're not going to get to do this. You're not going to get to do that. We're no longer doing this. And so for me, it was like, what am I aware of that I want to be as a dad? And at the same time as well, I'm adopted. Right? A lot of people don't know that. So I'm
I didn't know
adopted.
that.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I haven't talked about like my life, right? Much on the internet, funny enough. As much as I share, I don't share a lot. Right. So
right.
um when I look at what my examples were as parents, again, I thought about what I don't want to have for my daughter, what I don't want the legacy to be or the cycle to be. And so I started kind of looking around at like what men or fathers in my life that I can see do things that I want to do. Even when my daughter was a child, like a baby, right? Just an infant. I knew in that moment for me was this like switch of I'm going to take care of you and I'm going to love you and I'm just going to be there for you. What can I do to do that? And that honestly came down to understanding how to sacrifice certain things. At that point, it's not about me and what I want. It's I can still have this life that I want and desire, but at the same time enjoying it with you and
Right.
helping you see how I'm there for you. So I don't miss practices. I don't miss big events in her life. Even when I had a job, I didn't miss those things. I never did. It was never, I promised myself non-negotiable. I will be present in anything and everything that she does because that's important. So I looked at strong examples around me. So I go to church. So I looked at my pastor and I looked at what he did. I looked at the relationship he had with his kids who were older, much older than mine. Even when I was a younger dad, early 20s. Um, I say that like I'm an old guy, right? When I was in my early 20s.
Yeah, you're still
Um,
young.
yeah, I'm still young. I still got this. Um, and then yeah, so I looked around at who I really admired and who I wanted to emulate as a father, and who had these really strong relationships. But at the same time, I also looked at the dads around me who had bad habits or didn't have this awareness of what they were doing and how that affected their child. And so I've always been very observational or an observationist, whatever the correct terminology would be. And I looked at, okay, cool. He did this. He screamed at his kid. And what was the result for him and his daughter, or him, my buddy and their son? And okay, well, I see that there's this like slight divide. It didn't even look like respect. It just looked like I'm doing this because you're yelling at me, not I'm doing this because I respect you. And then I looked at a dad who would say, they would get on their kid's level, right? They'd get on a knee, look their kid eye to eye, and just say, hey, that's not okay. We don't do that. Okay, here's what we need to do. And so it's correction and it's action all at the same time. So that's something that I really big about. And so for me, for any other dads or parents, it's just be aware. Be aware of what you're doing. Be aware of what your kid's reaction is. And then look at other parents around you. How do the parents around you discipline and talk to their children? Or how do they involve their kids in certain things? And that's my biggest advice to a lot of people is like find good role models. But even if they're not what you would consider a good role model, it gives you the ability to look at what good you can do through their bad habits.
Yeah, I can understand that because I think that a lot of people try to learn from the error of their own ways, right?
Mhm.
So you make a mistake or you make an error and no, oh, I'm not going to do that again, right? Because I got
Right.
this consequence. But the wisdom comes in what you're saying, which is, and this is not just in being a father, this is just, to me, a father is a leader, right?
Right.
And so you look at other people's lives and the decisions they've made,
Mhm.
and you can learn whether they're doing things right or they're doing things wrong
Yeah.
and see the consequences of that. And so that's really wise of you to say. And I think that everyone can apply that in every aspect of your life, right? It's just
Yeah.
observe from good examples and bad ones, right? And then just
Yeah.
kind of make your own pie, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
I love that. Well, I mean, and another thing I wanted to ask you about was I love the fatherhood perspective of it just
Mhm.
because it's not discussed. But like I said, being a father is being a leader.
Mhm.
And I also know you were in the military before,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So how did that training or what you went through
Mhm.
translate over into maybe what you're doing now or even in father, being a husband, whatever you want to talk about? To me, it's just kind of being a leader. How did that, because I know people that have been in the military and then they don't know how to transition the skills that they've learned in business and real estate and their job and whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I want to know kind of what you learned and how you transitioned it over.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I think it's a fun topic to talk about. So, yeah, so I was in the Army for almost 9 years, and through it all, the way that I looked at it was a few key points, right? To your question of one of them being the mission's always first, right? So when it comes down to the mission being first, it's what is the objective or what are we trying to accomplish here? So in business, it's the same thing, right? Whether you're starting a business, starting a podcast, getting on social media, whatever it is, you have to identify what exactly is your mission. Okay. And once you establish that, then it's almost like a back plan, right? So, okay, cool. If my goal is to start a podcast, right? The end goal is I'm interviewing people. But before
Right.
that, need to have a system in order to schedule and manage that with reminders. And then I need to have the equipment. And then I need to have, you know what I'm saying? So you start to kind of break it down on the things you need. The next thing that comes into play is one of my favorite sayings. If you've been in the military, you know it. You may have probably heard this, is whenever something goes wrong, we have to adjust, we have to adapt, we have to overcome. So just because something happens, it doesn't mean that, oh, okay, the mission's over, right? There's no, that's, we adjust to what happened, we adapt, we adapt and we overcome. So, and that can be in any realm of business and any realm of entrepreneurship. And you and I both know real estate. That happens constantly. Title issue, seller issue, buyer issue, money issue, delay, escrow issue, contract. I mean, there's so many things that happen that we have to adjust and adapt and overcome. So it's like, all right, cool. The buyer backed out. What do I got to do? I got to find a new buyer, right? I'm gonna go find a new buyer. We're gonna get a new contract. We're gonna get them in, right, and you start to figure it out, and then you establish this emotional control and chaos, which is key. You have to have this higher level of emotional control when things are going just absolutely crazy around you. You got to be the one who's there, who's like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. That level head. And I'm not saying like things pop off and you're not gonna be like, you're just gonna be stoic. Like there will be a moment where you do feel emotion, oh God, the stress or whatever it is. You learn how to contain that. You learn how to control it. You learn how to harness it. Um, and then as well is when it came to leadership and it comes to the military, you're dealing with a lot of different people's personalities, a lot of different people's languages, a lot of different people's upbringings, a lot of different people's traumas, which is
Mm-hmm.
huge. And I didn't realize that until I got out of active duty military and I went to the reserves, because now you're integrating the military and people's personal lives a lot heavier. And you see them once a month. And you got soldiers who start confiding in you, telling you stuff. So when I look at the military and what it did for me as a leader, it showed me how to communicate the right way with my team. It showed me how to pinpoint what was going on in their lives. It showed me how to help them kind of overcome whatever it is that they're going through. So that way, again, we go back to the mission. How can we drive that mission? How can we get to whatever the objective is? And same thing as a father. I looked at, again, example. What example am I setting as a leader, whether it's in the military or not in the military? If I'm in a training segment and I have to kind of get everybody rallied up, make sure people are taken care of and they have what they need, as much as me telling a guy, hey, let me check your gear to make sure maybe his kit or his plate carrier is right, his rifle is right, he has his ammo, he's got his backpack, his food. It's the same thing with that. Hey, you got a backpack, you got your jacket, you got your lunch, you see what I'm saying? So you start to realize like these weird similarities in a military setting and in your home setting to where you can apply them. But I think, again, I'm going to probably use the word awareness a lot. You have to be aware. Like, how does what I do in the military coincide with what I do in business? So same thing, right? Things in business go sideways. Things in the military go sideways all the time. Plans change, but you can't just be like, oh my gosh, and give up. You got to figure out what you're going to do. Same thing as a parent. Maybe your kid woke up late. Maybe you woke up late. Maybe there's traffic. Some of these things, like, hey, just accept it, adjust, adapt, and overcome. Well, hey, the perfect example this morning, gave my daughter her cereal. She spilled her cereal all over the place. I can either be like, oh, and freak out and be pissed, and then she's crying, and then it's this horrible like interaction, and that's how we start the day. Or it's like, okay, hey, listen, accidents happen. I can't say that I've never spilled anything, but this is why I tell you to make sure you pay attention. When I give you a bowl of food, you need to, see what you're doing. It's the same thing. So it's like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get your new bowl of cereal. You're going to clean that up. You clean it. I'll get your food. And then we're going to keep moving. There's no point in me sitting there and being like up in arms and pissed off and she's upset. So again, same thing in the military. How many times in the military that I have to go through something that didn't go right, rather than being all pissed off and upset about it, embrace the suck and just keep it moving, really.
So how have you learned this emotional control, right? Because I feel like people in the military are better at this than just like normal civilians like myself, right? Because you're in a much more high stress type of situation. So then I think you bring it back to normal day life and you're like, it's not as bad as going to war, right? So how do you like, what advice would you give for someone that's trying to learn how to just control their emotions really when there's high stress?
I think of this, I use a lot of sayings, I use a lot of metaphors. Slow is fast and fast is slow. And by that, I mean, if you're going through some situation where maybe you responded too quickly, I'm sure you can attest to this. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. Is, let's say you get in an argument with your significant other. They say something you do that hurts you or triggers you or makes you upset, and you respond really fast. How long does it take for you guys to get back to a good place?
Right.
Probably a little bit longer, right? But then if you take a second and you look at, okay, they said this, there's a few seconds in between your ability to respond. If you break down what is going on, and me as a husband, I'll admit it, I do a lot more wrong. I may sometimes do things that just aren't right. Maybe I forgot to put something away. Maybe I didn't do what was asked. And that triggers my wife. Hey, I have to accept that. That's my fault. But if she's like, oh, you always do this. And I go, boom. And I go, well, you know what you always do?
Right.
Guess what? I'm probably going to have a day or 2 or 4 of just like tension.
Right.
But if I slow down, again, slow is fast, right? If I slow down and say, you know what? You're right. I should have put that away. I completely forgot. That's my fault. I'm sorry. Let me go fix that real quick. It's probably going to be a little bit faster of a cool down than it would be if I reacted quicker. So that's something I'm really big about with people, is just take your time with how you respond. It's the same thing in sales. It's the same thing in business. It's the same thing in life. Slow is fast, fast is slow. Take your time. You don't always have to be like, boom, immediate response. And then again, if we tie to business, especially with sales, and I know you know this with buyers or even sellers, if you text them, you give them time to think about a reply. which sometimes is not in the best practice. But if you get them on the phone, it pushes them to have to say something and make a decision because you're in the moment. So
Right.
again, there's benefits, there's pros and there's cons. The slow is fast and fast is slow, and you can leverage them to how you need to. But as somebody who's trying to practice emotional control and really understand how to control yourself, my biggest thing is breathing, and then just consciousness, or then awareness, right? You're getting upset. Let me slow down. Let me breathe. Let me put myself in a different environment if I have to. And if you can, sometimes you're in a position where you can't necessarily put yourself in that. If you have to, just take a really big, deep breath and just slow down your mind. You just have to take control of your mind and how you're processing whatever's going through your body at that moment. Because it can be adrenaline, it can be anxiety. Both of them are going to peak what's going on inside of you. And then whatever happens after is what's going to determine kind of where you head in that moment. So
Yeah, that's great advice, really. Because emotional control affects every area of life, but especially if you're a leader. And let's, I'm just talking about like for business, right? So if you have people under you,
yep.
the way you react to them or in certain situations will show them what is acceptable in the organization, right?
Yeah.
You're essentially making your company, the culture is really based off of the CEO, right? Like for the most part, right? Like
Yeah.
if they're hot-headed, and I mean, everyone's going to be hot-headed in the
Yeah.
organization, just flows all down. But
Yeah.
if you're cool, calm, and collected, I mean, that becomes kind of the culture, right?
Right.
So, another thing I wanted to ask you about was I saw that you guys are opening a brick and mortar business in
Yes.
Mexico.
Yes.
So I need to know more about this because this really intrigues me because we're both, well, I came from a different country. I came here
Mhm.
when I was a baby, and I've always wondered what it would be like to open a business like in another country.
Yeah.
And so tell us about that business that you're opening up, and how it's been, how it's different than, obviously doing business in the US.
So great question. By the time this goes live, I'm sure that business will be already open and operating. So I'll say it here because it's not. I've been lately, as you've seen, and some people have asked me like, "What is this Project X?" And so what we're opening is a Connect Center. Some people may look at it as like a VA company or a customer service company, but the reason we call it a Connect Center is because our clients and our team are going to be able to connect in various ways. So we're going to have in-house agents coming into an office space, which is what we've been kind of promoting, right? Is that we have this office space and we have our agents coming in there, or what I just call it the team, right? We have our team coming in where we're going to be servicing customer service individuals. So we have attorneys who need a customer service agent just on the phone who kind of schedules appointments, make sure to confirm things are going on. We have the real estate side of things where people need a cold caller, right? So they can get their cold callers with us, or insurance people who need it. Car dealerships, same thing. They need somebody to just confirm appointments and schedule. And then we're also planning on opening more so divisions though. And this is really where my vision's at is when we look at the vision of the company, if I'm opening a real estate side of it, that'll be the telemarketing side. Then we'll have the customer service side. And then we're going to have an IT side. And we'll have a social media side. So if you kind of see where it's going, it's different branches to service different clients' needs. With the IT side, what's really exciting is that we'll be able to service business owners, companies, organizations who either need somebody in-house who does IT, or they're going to be able to handle basic setup of systems and helping people get squared away with maybe it's a CRM, maybe it's PPC, whatever it might be. We'll have in-house people to do that. So it's gonna be fun. We're excited to open this up. In regards to what it's like, it's different. It's a process, and there's a lot of I guess red tape, so to speak, and making sure that you do it ethically and you do it correct, and understand whatever country that you're going to go do that in, that you're operating by what their laws are, because it's very different than the US. So in Mexico, compared to the US, in the US, you go online, you can make an LLC in 5 minutes, right? Oh, I want to use this name, go to open corporates, it's available, cool. And then you go purchase it and you make an LLC and you're kind of done. But in Mexico, it's a whole process. And thankfully, Crystal is from, she is a dual citizen. So we have somewhat of an unfair advantage to where she's able to go to that side, get an LLC, meet with She had to meet with a notary because in Mexico, notaries are like next to God, apparently. Yeah. Whereas,
Wow.
again, yeah, apparently, right. But over here in the US, notaries are just like stamping a document.
Dime a dozen.
Yeah. Yeah. Like everybody's a notary nowadays, right?
Right.
But over there, it's different. And the other thing is making sure that, and this is something that I think is important, whether it's that you want to go open a business in another country or anybody else wants to do it, is finding the right team, and connecting with the right people, because it's literally all about who you know. 1000%. Crystal's my wife, for anybody wondering. She spent countless hours researching and finding the right people. And I mean, interviewing accountants, interviewing attorneys, going through notaries, and then having to go through the process of getting this account and LLC set up. And then again, figuring out the structure on how you're going to financially make sure that this goes properly and that you're not doing anything that's, again, unethical or illegal. So highly recommend find that strong team who's going to give you the right guidance. So we're excited. We finally have everything about done. I made a joke yesterday on Instagram that this is 87% done. But in all actuality, yeah, we're about there. And we've already got clients lined up. We got our team. We're already doing interviews. So we're really excited to start making a bigger impact in the community and start giving like just opportunities to our employees.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
a really big opportunity. I mean, and you have a huge vision with it, which I'm sure you come up as a visionary. If I, I don't, you know,
I'm
you
kind of
can
a hybrid.
confirm.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So I can see really big, but I can also put into play like how I want things to do it and then just do it.
Got
So
it. So you're
yeah.
able to come up with the step 1, 2, and 3 and kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Good, good.
Yeah.
And and one of the things that you mentioned was finding the right people.
Mm-hmm.
How have you done that with your different businesses?
A lot of vetting, and a lot of word of mouth. I don't trust everybody I meet right off the bat. Very slow to do that. But it's very important to give people opportunity and chances. Um, I can say the military did play a huge part in that. One of the sayings that one of my old leaders used to tell me was, "Don't mistake my kindness as weakness." And so I kind of lead with that sometimes, where I tell people like, "Hey, I'm really nice. I'm the nicest dude in the world." I mean, you go on Instagram, I'm like happiest dude. I'm dad. But at the same time too, it's like, hey, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. Like business is business, and I can separate and turn that switch off as needed. With finding the right people, I would say it comes down to a lot of connection, a lot of conversation, and then again, like word of mouth is played a huge part with me. Is just finding good people in my life that have aligned themselves with what I believe in, and I look at how they do business. I look at how they treat people. I look at what other people may have said about them. And that's like, I have a perfect example. I just had a meeting the other day with some friends of mine in Phoenix, and they had an opinion of one of my closest friends because another person said something about them. And so they already had this image painted of this person. So even then, it's like, be wary of who you're taking advice from and double check their information. So something else you can take, military term, trust but verify. Hey, they say that he's no good, but then they talk to me and then they interact with this person themselves and they're like, oh my gosh, this guy's like amazing. And it's like, see, you can't always trust where you're getting this feedback or this guidance or this leadership from, because even leaders are sometimes in a case, they'll be a wolf in sheep's clothing. And you think that you're following the right person when really you're not. And so again, it's all about trusting but verifying information, as well as going through it, interviewing, conversations. And even then, like with what Crystal was doing, was she would meet with an accountant and then she'd meet with another accountant the same day. And she would cross-reference their information against each other. And if that person would doubt it, then she could find somebody who ended up having the right information to see where these things align. So it's all about doing your due diligence and making sure that you find the right guidance as needed. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Since you're slower to trust,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
How long, or like what are the things that you need to do to finally be like, I can trust this person. And I'm curious because, like what you mentioned, there are wolves in sheep clothing.
Mhm.
I call them Sauls and not Davids, right? You're like,
Mm,
if your leader's a Saul, you better be careful. But if your
yeah.
leader's a David, then you can actually grow.
Mhm.
So, how do you like, I know there might be certain things you do just subconsciously,
Yeah.
but how do you like interact with someone after however many times? Is it their words? Is it what they do? Is it, you mentioned a few things like how they interact with people and things like that, but is there a system like to how you trust? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, in essence, no, there's not like I don't have like a sheet where I'm like, all right, check, check, check.
Yeah.
Um, where I'm like, okay, answered my phone call. All right. No, I really pay attention to the conversation right off the bat. I'm like, who am I interacting with? And obviously like energy. And over time, as you spend more time with people, their natural selves start to come out.
Yeah.
The organic individual of who you're dealing with will come out. So in the beginning, I'm open arms with everybody. And if you've interacted with me whatsoever, my infamous statement is like, hey, if you need anything, call me. I always say that. I need to stop saying it sometimes because people legit will call me every day.
Yeah. You got to be
um,
careful with that.
yeah, I gotta hold back on that one. Um, and so what I'll do is I'll just interact with them a lot, and I'll see how they interact. I'll see if they're reciprocating whatever it is that I'm putting into them. So then I can kind of gauge what kind of relationship it's going to be. Are you pouring into me? Am I pouring into you? Are you valuable to me? Am I valuable to you? And then you start to figure out like what kind of relationship are we going to have? Because then you start to kind of funnel them into certain categories of life where
Right.
okay, you're more of a business associate, you're more of a friend, you're someone who's going to be like family. And then there's like, oh, you're the person that I clearly like, if I want to tell you something and then I find out from this person that we both know that I told you something in confidence and you told them, then it's like boom, like that trust is immediately, there's no way, how am I going to do business with you if you can't even maintain this thing that we've got going? um But yeah, I would say it starts off with the conversation and energy. Consistency is not like another big thing for me, is like how consistent are you in my life? Um, is this like a one-way road, right? Are you just hitting me
Right.
up whenever you need something? Because that happens a lot. I mean, and I've called people out on that before. Where I'm like, hey, you only call me when you need something. Like, I don't appreciate that, to be honest.
Right.
And like I don't mind telling people that because again, at the end of the day, like you're sucking from my energy in my life, which doesn't, you're now pulling energy that I could have poured into someone else. Um, I think that's kind of it, to be honest.
I think that's a great way because I think subconsciously or just when you're aware of
Mhm.
things, you know who pours energy into you. Like you
Yeah,
know who puts gas into the fire, right?
yeah,
And then I don't know if it's happened to you, but you're in a conversation with someone and like you're done with the conversation and you
hmm,
just feel like so tired, like, oh my
yeah,
God, this person just took everything that I had for the day,
yeah,
um and you're a husband, a father, a business owner, you have so many things going on, so you need energy to keep going, right?
right.
So how do you conserve your energy from it honestly, every interaction, I think there is a transfer, but
Hmm,
there are some that give and some that take.
yeah.
So how do you make sure to conserve your energy so you have the energy to do all the things you need to do?
So I'm kind of a robot, to be honest, a little bit. There's days where I'll literally be pouring out from into people from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. like nonstop. And that's again in all the categories. It's a husband, a father, business owner, mentor, coach, all that stuff. Um, and sometimes I can just keep it going. What I'm really big about though is shutting off. Like that's huge for me is when I shut off, like we're not talking. Like I'm hanging out with my wife, I'm hanging out by myself. Maybe I put on a show. And like for the record, like I love TV shows and like movies. Like people be like, "Oh, you can't watch any TV." Like, no, I'm sorry. You know what? Like,
You
like
can.
that, yeah, like you can, like you can be successful and still watch TV. Um, and so like, yeah, I'll be able to shut off a lot of times. And at the end of the day, it's, I will have that cutoff time where it's like 10 o'clock, maybe 9 o'clock, where I'm like, okay, nobody else is getting a hold of me. Um, like whatsoever. The only person that can get a hold of me is like family, like really, really close friends. And even then, like I have do not disturb on, and if you're not on that list of people, like you're not getting through. And so that's something for me that I think is important that other people can do, is just learn how to shut off, like understand that whatever problems, right, quote unquote problems, for those of you who are just listening to the audio, I'm using big quotes, problems, those problems will be there tomorrow. You can deal with it tomorrow. You can address certain things tomorrow. And obviously not all the time. There are some things that are going to require your attention, especially as a business owner. That's your responsibility and your duty. You chose to start a business, take responsibility, take care of the things you got to do. But like certain things you don't really have to worry about until the next day. Right? Maybe it's that email, maybe it's that text message. Like you can do it tomorrow morning. Like it'll be all right.
Right.
So yeah, I'm really big about shutting off and just really just being present with my family, being present with myself. And then yeah, I typically just don't deal with people for certain periods of time.
There's a shut off time. That's good. I like that. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about, that I know you have had a lot of success, especially with your wife. I know you guys have a lot of different things going on in business, not just real estate.
Yeah.
But what I like to ask people is, tell me about one of your failures and how you were able to overcome that. Because a lot of the people, I mean, I to this day still listen to podcasts like every single day. But when it's difficult, that's what kind of embarks and gives some hope to people that, you know, you don't need to stay within that. So what was one of your experiences, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
I will happily I tell this. I love this story. So it was 2021, late 2021, and we could not get a deal. We were burning money. Our team wasn't performing at all, so we let a lot of people go. I mean, we were literally burning to the minimum of what we had. And Crystal and I were like in this office before it was this way, literally like crying with each other, because it's like, how did we get here? And it was just awful. It was awful. And it was hard, and it was like, all right, we've got to make some decisions. I mean, I think we had like a month and a half left of like expenses, like money in our account, for like our living and our daughter and food and all that. So I was like, okay, well, we got to figure this out. And so as that 2 weeks went by, we had 4 weeks left of basically money to live off of. And I was like, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't have a deal. I can't figure like, I don't know what we're going to do. So I had to kind of humble up, and I had to call my dad, and I had to ask my dad for a loan, which was the hardest thing to do. Because again, right, my dad and I didn't have a great relationship for a lot of my life. But again, we're more so friends. So I called my dad and I asked him for a loan of $5,000. And so he gave us the $5,000, and that floated us for a little bit. I gave us a little bit like
breathing room. Yeah.
Right. A little bit of breathing room. And then I also got a job at Amazon. A lot of people a lot of people don't know this story. I got a job at Amazon, and I worked from, I think it was like 10 at night, 9 something at night, till like 5 in the morning, almost 6 in the morning. Yeah. And so I was working all night. I'd get home 6, eat a snack, and then I'd pass out for like a couple hours. And then I'd get up and I'd get on the phones and I'd start making calls. And I remember telling Crystal all the time, like, hey, what kind of came to heart was like this reoccurring thought to myself of, I'm only here at Amazon, right? I'm only here as long as I have to be. So I'm like, okay, like, what does that mean to me? So I kept saying it. I'm only here as long as I need to be, as long as I have to be. It's really what it came down to. And I realized this was like, I'm in control of what actions and things that I'm doing, and I can kind of manifest whatever it is I'm looking for. And so at this time, we're scraping by with the Amazon money. We're stretching everything else we can. We got rid of as many systems as we can to make sure that the business could still function. And then even at the same time, Crystal, shout out to Quentin Flores. I got to give him some love. He gave Crystal a position with their virtual squad company to help with some like tax exemption stuff that they were doing. And so she was making some money doing that. I was making the money at Amazon. And then again, we had that loan from my dad. 3 weeks hammering the phones, day after day after day after day after day. Boom, got a lead. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I knew it was a God's timing kind of thing because, and you know this, and anybody in real estate knows this, how many times did we call a lead that's like, I've never been called before? 90% doesn't happen. This dude's like, I've never been called before. It was a probate lead. My mom died 2 years ago. My brother, who's also on the loan, on the deed, is flying into town this week. So if you want to come by, you can come by and check it out. And I was like, what are the odds of this happening? Like, thank you.
Right.
Long story short, go to the house. You know how that goes. Go to the house, lock them up, find a buyer. We made, I think it was like 17 grand, 16, 17 grand.
Nice.
And then shortly after that, we did a refi on our house. So we had that money come in, and it was like thing after thing after thing after thing. And I was like, wow, like we literally, oh, this is the best part of the story. I completely left this out. When I was asking my dad, talking about trying to figure out what I'm going to do and get going here, my dad said to me, you got to find the money, Jay. So my dad calls me Jay. You got to find the money. So Crystal and I every day, hey, we're going to find the money. We're going to find the money. And it was like, boom, we got this deal. Boom, this opportunity came. Boom, this thing happened. And we went from like barely making it to like skyrocketing back out of this whole situation. But I can tell you that 5 to 8 weeks was like one of the hardest times of my life, where I legit was ready to like call my old boss. Now, actually, I did. I texted him. I texted my old boss to see if might have been an opportunity for me to go back. That's where I was mentally. I was ready to just throw in the towel in entrepreneurship, go back to my job. Again, there's no shame with the job, but for me, I was like, no, this ain't it for me.
Right.
And literally in a span of a few weeks, got ourselves out of it, pushed through it. It was hard. Would I go through it again? If I had to, yeah. Because I realize now what that molded me and what that did to me. And it changed me, and it changed my wife, and it changed our dynamic as a family. It changed a lot of things. And so now looking back at it now, I'm like, you know what? That was one of the hardest, but also greatest times of my life.
What'd you learn from it?
Definitely perseverance. I learned how bad. Can I cuss on this? Can I say one bad word?
Yeah. This
Okay.
is you.
All right. So, it's not that bad a word. I learned how badass of a wife I have. To be straight up, I think that was like one of the biggest things. Is I learned that my partner had my back. Like, she wasn't gonna let me quit. She wasn't gonna let me throw in the towel. And she was willing to go to war too, while I was at the same time. And she was willing to hold it down with Maddie to make sure that she was taken care of while I'm just trying to get something going.
Right.
And I learned that, like, that, as cliche as it sounds, that saying, right? Your current situation isn't your final destination. Like, that became so aware to me, and like became so real for me. Like, I knew that couldn't be it, but I legit was like, this is it. I'm gonna quit. Like, I'm gonna quit doing what we're doing. I'm gonna figure this out. Or like, I don't know, I'm just gonna go to my job. Just get this over with. And she wouldn't let me. She was like, no. She was like, I didn't marry you because you're a quitter. I didn't marry you because that's the kind of guy you are. I married you because you're gonna always figure it out, and you're gonna push. And then that's what happened. So yeah.
You know, that's beautiful, because in marriage, typically when you have the biggest issues, finances is a big issue in marriage, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of marriages, when they have no money or very little money, they have the most fights, right? And they like go against each other. They're no longer a team. And when they have money, they're a team again, right? Like, that's usually how it works. But your wife, from what you're saying, it's when she encouraged you most.
Yeah.
Right. And so what is that dynamic of you working with your wife? Because you really need a supportive partner when you're going through, when you feel like a failure. I mean, I know what that feels like,
Yeah.
So how would you, like, was it just the thoughts of your wife telling you that helped you push through, or was it something else?
I think it was a combination of that, and like, this is gonna be a really cool story one day. Like, I think that, again, legacy, right? I looked at where we were as a family in a situation, and I'm like, dude, Maddie had no idea. She had no clue what was going on, which is good. Like, she shouldn't. She's, at that time she was what? She was 5. Why should a 5-year-old know that's what's going on? And so, yeah, I looked at the how cool this is going to be for us and the
Right.
story of it. And I mean, my wife just being there. Like, I'm sure if I scrolled back in my phone to that time frame of our life, the text messages between each other, like the love, the encouragement, the support, the patience, right? Like, every day she'd be like, did we get a lead? Did you get a lead? Did you get a lead? And like, at the same time, as much pressure as that was, it was good pressure. And it was like almost as like a thing of like, she's really counting on me. She's counting on me to figure this out. And for me, it was like, what kind of example am I, again, right? Kind of example am I leading or setting as a father, as a husband, as a man? If I can't get us out of this, like, I was like, yo, I can't let that happen. Like, it was like, this is not going to happen. Like, we're going to get out of this. So that was kind of the thought process of where we were. Yeah.
Mhm. I love that. I think that's very encouraging and shows people that just because you're going through the mud,
Mhm.
or there's this saying that says, right, if you're going through hell, why are you going to stay there?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't stay in hell.
Yeah.
But um but I think that having a good supportive partner is just key in success, right?
Yeah.
And so are there other people that have been instrumental for you to have the success that you've achieved, right? I'm sure there's probably a lot, but who and what did you learn from them that have given you the success that you've been able to achieve right now?
So the first 2 guys that come to mind is Sharktino and Sharktino Hernandez, or Tino Hernandez, and then Randy Hernandez, or AKA the Bull Shark. Those 2 guys, I met them years ago, and we became really close last year and the year before. They taught me a lot about, really, for me, like, what potential I had, and they showed me what was possible, and they showed me what love was like, as like a brotherhood kind of love, because I didn't really have that. And when I got out of the
Most men
military,
don't.
yeah, most men don't, like. And when I got out of the military, like, you go from having all this camaraderie around you, like, to none.
Right.
It's weird. And then you start to realize, like, there's people that you meet that are just there in your life that you think are there, and they're really not. Again, right back to vetting, and like, who do I consider a friend now? Completely different from that time of my life. People I thought that were like friends and colleagues and business people, like people in my life that I'm like, yo, you got me. Like, I quickly realized, like, yo, they don't. And I think of the movie Southpaw. You see that movie?
I have seen that movie.
Okay. There's a scene in the beginning of it with Jake Gyllenhaal and his wife where he had just finished a fight. It's like the first 10, 15 minutes. And she says, in a couple of years, you're going to be punch drunk. And when that happens and you lose it all, everybody around you is going to scatter like roaches. And all that's going to be left is and I think she quoted her name and her daughter in the movie. All that's going to be left are me and their daughter's name. And that sits with me every single. I watch that movie probably once a week. Like,
Wow, you love that.
yeah.
Is that your favorite
I,
movie?
like, it's become one of my favorites. Like, that movie gets me going. And as sad as it is, like, the wife dies, right? Spoiler alert. But I think of that scene, and I think about that time of my life, but I also think about the people that did stick out and come into my life. Yeah, Tino and Randy stuck out. Q, or Quentin Flores, stuck out a lot for us. He was definitely there for us at that time and was like, whatever you need, just let me know. That meant a lot to us. Like, our true friends became family, really stuck out. My pastor, he played a huge part, Pastor Scotty. Like, I met with him like every 2 weeks. I was gonna say religiously, but we met every few weeks, and we would have lunch, and we would just talk, and he would give me insight, and he would help. But those are the people in my family. My mom and my dad were, at that time, they didn't really know everything that was going on, but like, I think, as parents, right, you kind of know when something's up with your kid. They were just supportive and like made it very aware, like, hey, we're here, kind of thing. My parents just split up, but they both knew, like, hey, something's up with my other. Obviously, my dad knew clearly
Right.
what was happening, but I didn't tell my mom everything until later. So yeah, I would say those are the handful of people.
I love that. And I think that really we need people as much as we want to be like, I'm strong. I don't need nobody or whatever. It's like
Yeah,
we do. We
yeah,
do. And so I really enjoyed that part of it because I think it resonates and it's very relatable to a lot of people.
yeah.
And there is like the mountain that you're climbing,
Hmm.
eventually you do overcome it. And so
Yeah,
I'm happy to hear that happened with you and your wife and Maddie, and you know that we're here talking about this now today. It was
yeah,
a cool story.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a cool. Now I'm like, yo, that story's great. I'm like, but let's just leave that. I'm
Yeah,
like,
let's just that could
yeah,
be the last thing anyways.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was what's some advice you would give to couples that are in business together?
Oh,
Because I don't know how long you and your wife have been in business together, but I'm sure I know it's been more than a couple years because I've known you guys for a few years now,
yeah.
and you guys are still trucking. So what advice would you give?
Uh, yeah. So fun fact. Now I just got to throw this out there. Like, I am not the one who brought entrepreneurship into this family.
Hmm.
Okay. So yeah, granted, when I was younger, I did sell things that were not the, I guess, legal route, or if anything. Uh, it's a form of entrepreneurship, right?
Right, it is.
But yeah, no, I joined the army, and then like when I got out of the army, I got my job, and Crystal was the one who was like, "Hey, there's this thing called wholesaling, and I found this guy on the internet who has tattoos like you. Like, I think you could relate to him." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like, I completely brushed it off. And then she was like, "Hey, there's this event in Phoenix," and so she was like, "I'm gonna go whether you go or not." And I was like, "Okay, I guess we're going to this event in Phoenix." Um, so yeah, she's the one who brought entrepreneurship into this family. And then from that, she just kind of sparked it. But advice for people who want to do business with their spouses or couple: clearly define exactly who's doing what. Clearly define who's doing what. Um, that's one. Two, don't forget each other. Don't forget that, like, you guys have a relationship and you're not just business partners. You
Right.
are spouses. You are significant others. Make sure to take time for you guys. It's great to build companies and business together, but like, what good is it if like you're gonna just hate each other in the end of it? It's no good. And we've been there. Like, we've gotten to a point where like literally everything was business. We'd go out to like on a date, which is very rare. Even now we don't go out together that often. But when we do, it was like, so what do you want to talk about? Oh, did you follow up with that thing? And oh, did you do this thing? And it became like that. So it's making a point to remember each other, prioritize each other, respect each other, especially in a business. Don't still like if something doesn't, if I tell our employee, be here at 9, and Crystal's like, you can get there at 9:30. Don't go to your employee and be like, oh, well, she's wrong and you need to listen to me. Don't do that. Just have that conversation with your employee. Hey, actually, I would prefer you to be here at 9 because we have XYZ going on. So I need you on time. Okay, cool. And that addresses that. And then you can go to your partner and be like, hey, I told them to be here at this time because of these certain things. And you got to remember to communicate with your spouse, especially in business. And if you have kids, it's even more so because then you got kids commitments, wife's commitments, husband's commitments, and then you have business commitments. There's a lot going on. So make sure to obviously communicate. Don't forget each other and clearly define roles on who does what and how they do it. And if Crystal handles all the back end documentation, hey, that's her thing, and I respect that. And I'm not going to meddle with it. Same thing with training employees for the new company, especially. That's my role. She's not meddling with it. So we make sure to keep it very you, me. Yeah, those are my
Love
big
that.
three.
And I think that what you were saying, right, with the employees, I almost thought about parenting
Yeah.
because, I've learned I don't have kids.
Mhm.
I have a dog, which is basically my daughter.
Yeah.
And my mom was always like, don't undermine your husband's
Mhm.
authority when he's like correcting your child. It's kind of the same thing, right? And it's vice versa. It's vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Because then they're like, oh, I know I can go to him for this and I can go to her for that. And they're like, start trying to manipulate the situation. But so that makes a lot of sense what you were saying. Another thing I wanted to ask you just to kind of end it off here, because I know
Mhm.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, but um, I wanted to ask, I know that you care about legacy. I know you
Mhm.
care about being a good father. So, what is your why and what kind of an impact are you trying to leave?
Ooh, that's a great question. What is my why? I would say it's funny because my why now is different than what my why used to be. So I would say now my why, nobody's asked me that in a very long time. I would say my why is, I mean, of course, right, my family, but it's my family not because it's like it's my family. It's because I look at it, and I had this conversation with Crystal recently. I'm adopted. My daughters are my only blood. That's it. There's nobody else. So for me, my why is carrying out that like that bloodline keeps flowing and it keeps to continue to grow and it keeps continuing to push out. And again, it's impacting my own bloodline to be as best as it can be and being the determining one in my family who made that decision. And again, kudos, like, and with my wife as well, is where we want this family to lead and become. And we want this last name to be known for something great. We want to be able to make a global impact and help families all over the globe, whether it's building schools, building nurseries, maybe helping kids who get adopted, helping kids in need, helping families in need, creating foundations like that. That for us is like really, really, really what's important here is making that everlasting impact and impacting not just my legacy, but legacies all over the globe, whether it's someone I can directly help one on one, maybe in a group setting, or just I created something or my daughter created something that long surpasses any of us. So, yeah.
Love it. Love it. That's a great why or a great impact you're trying to leave. So I love
Yeah.
that. Um, so if somebody wanted to get in touch with you,
Mhm.
whether it's the new business
Yeah.
or, you guys have so many different businesses, I don't even know at this point. But I'm one of the myriad of things that you guys are doing.
Mhm.
What's the best way for someone to get in touch with you and maybe try to do a deal together in real estate, or if they want to maybe use the new brick and mortar service that you're doing down there in Mexico?
The best way I would say is Instagram. I'm like super
Okay.
active on Instagram. So if you guys want to find me, it's literally my name, Joseph Frangos. And I have to say it clearly because people confuse Frangos. Joseph Frangos. If you send me a DM, like I will reply. It's not in a VA. It's not a bot. It is me. And so yeah, if people want to reach out to me, they can find me on Instagram or Facebook if you're not IG friendly.
Perfect. Okay, well, it was a pleasure having you. I think you really left it on a high note, and I really enjoyed learning more about your story and
I
your
appreciate it.
life. And I think that leadership just resonates with you and Crystal, right? So one day I got to have her on as well.
Do it. Yeah, definitely do it.